For Homer, the sky wasn't blue. It was bronze, or even iron. Homer describes the sea hundreds of times, but never once called it blue. To him it was the famous wine-dark sea. And you know what else was wine-dark? Oxen. And who's grazing nearby? Violet sheep. You might think the ancient Greeks were colorblind or just crazy. But the truth is, your brain is looking for something completely different than Homer's was. Let me show you what really mattered to them. So, what was the most important thing to Homer? It wasn't hue, what we typically think of as color. It was properties like value or brightness, but it went even deeper. The ancient Greek world was described in terms of sheen, texture, material properties, and even emotion. This explains why our first image looked so strange. Its hues were all wrong to our modern eyes, but its tonal values, the relationship between light and dark, were perfectly logical. The bronze sky was the brightest element, the wine-dark sea and oaks were the darkest, and the violet sheep were somewhere in between. The moment we stripped away the color noise, our brains recognized the correct tonal structure and the image suddenly made sense. So, to be clear, this bizarre image was not a reconstruction of how ancient Greeks literally saw the world. It was an experiment to show you the absurd results you get when you try to translate Homer's words using our modern, hue-focused logic. So, what is this video all about? We will be exploring the mystery of Homer's colors through several lenses, from classics to modern cognitive linguistics. We would not just ask why Homer had no word for blue. We will explore the entire color world of the ancient Greeks. We will uncover the universal patterns for how color names emerge in language. We will ask what is more important, hue or value. And we will see why a portrait painted with completely unnatural colors can still look perfectly recognizable. And finally, we will ask if any of that ancient perception is still alive in us today. And spoiler alert, it is, and more than you'd think. Hello and welcome to Pictus channel. I am Maria, the author, the artist and the voice of this video. You probably noticed that I am not a native speaker, but believe me, I'm doing my best to make this voiceover as clear and as understandable as it could be. Thank you for watching. William Gladstone was not a linguist or an artist. He was a Prime Minister of Great Britain and he had a passion project, Homer. His obsession ran so deep that in 1858 he undertook a massive task. He counted every single color reference in the Homer epics. What he found was a bit strange. Black appeared nearly 200 times, white about 100. But the actual colors. Red showed up just 15 times, while yellow and green appeared fewer than 10 times each. And the word for blue? 0. And this in Greece, the country literally sandwiched between the blue sea and blue sky. But it was not just the missing words. Gladstone noted how strangely Homer used the color terms he did have. The word porphyrios, roughly purple or crimson, described not just cloth, but surging blood, a dark wave, a rainbow, and even iron. The famous epithet oinops, or wine dark, was used for the sea and also for oxen. So, how did he explain this? His most famous and controversial idea was that the organ of color and its expressions were but partially developed among the Greeks. And this single phrase sparked the popular myth that ancient Greeks were colorblind. But Gladstone rejected that idea. He wasn't talking about the physical eye, but a kind of a mental organ for color. A culture's ability not to just see colors, but to notice them, give them importance, and finally give them names. The cultural organ, Gladstone argued, was simply untrained when it came to blue. So, blue remained on the periphery, blending into broader and more important categories like dark or shimmering. Ironically, the sensational debate about unevolved vision overshadowed Gladstone's most important insight, that Homer's language was focused on value, not hue. To us, a world described mainly in terms of light and dark might seem dull, but the Greeks had a completely different system for categorizing color. In fact, the color was often not the important feature at all. Stick around and you might find that it's our own color system that seems incomplete. Ancient Greeks didn't live in a world of abstract blues and greens. They lived in a world of materials, states, and textures. There wasn't just red, there was the color of fresh blood. And wine dark isn't a shade of purple. It's a shared quality between wine and a bull's hide. Dark, rich, full of vitality, and glistening in the sun. The Greek eye didn't just register the surface color, it captured the essence. To prove this, we just have to look at Homer's most common color words. These aren't just labels for hues, they are containers of meaning, linking objects that to our modern eyes have absolutely nothing in common. Kyaneos, often translated as dark blue or jet black, but the usage in Homer proves it really meant dark gleaming. Homer uses it for an incredible range of things. The brows of Zeus, Hector's hair, morning veils, storm clouds, swallows, porpoises, and even shimmering snakes. Fun fact. Our modern word kyan comes from this, showing just how much the meaning has shifted. Glavkos, used for lighter, lower saturation values. Its most famous use is for the goddess Athena, Glavkopis. We used to translate this as grey-eyed, but bright-eyed or flashing-eyed is more accurate. It refers to the glint of her eyes, implying her sharp intelligence. Homer uses the same word for the churning sea, the silvery underside of olive leaves, and vines. It's not a specific pigment, it's a quality of pale shimmer. Porphyros, traditionally purple, but Homer uses it for dark clouds, surging waves, rainbows, blood, and even iron. It describes sea and wool alike, the likely meaning, dark and shimmering. Crucially, scholars link it to the verb porphyro, to heave or surge. So the word carries a hidden sense of turbulent motion. Chloros, the perfect example of a color state. We often translate it as green, but Homer applies it to honey, fresh twigs, tears, dew, and a face pale with fear. The core meaning is fresh, moist, living, or vigorous. It's a pale yellow-green brightness that signals life. Erythros, the general term for red, considered by anthropologists to be the first true hue defined in any culture, after black and white, primarily associated with blood, but for gore or bloodstains, Homer uses the more specific phaenos. Xanthos, used for the blonde hair of heroes like Achilles. Some scholars link this to a root implying rapid, vibrating motion, suggesting the epithet might actually describe the hero's volatile, fiery nature, not just his hair pigment. Ioisis, used for fine wool. It compares the object to a violet flower, conveying a complex dark quality and a specific rich texture, rather than just a flat purple hue. All these examples reveal that Homeric terms weren't fixed spectral coordinates. They were broad semantic fields covering darkness, brightness, shimmer, and vitality. It was a qualitative, not quantitative approach. The priority was the object's texture and inner life. That is why Homer's sky wasn't blue, it was iron, sidereos, or bronze, chalkeos. These weren't colors. They were experiences of blinding radiance, metallic hardness, and the terrifying solidity of the heavens. Now let's tackle the most iconic epithet of them all, unobspondos. It appears in the poems 17 times, and it is the master key to the Greek color world. First, we need to talk about translation. If you read Homer in English, you know the phrase. It's unavoidable. The wine dark sea. This poetic translation has become so famous that we often forget it's just an interpretation. But if we look at the word strictly philologically, wine dark isn't quite right. The Greek word ainops is a compound. Ainos means wine, but the second part ops is etymologically connected to the word for face or eye. So a literal brutal translation wouldn't be wine dark, it would be wine faced or even wine eyed. It sounds strange to our ears, But this literal meaning changes everything. It shifts our focus from a flat, static color, dark red, to the dynamic expression of the water's surface. So, what does it actually mean for the sea to have the face of wine? To get it, we need to look at a few layers of meaning. Number 1. Value over hue. First, the obvious. Wine is dark, the epithet suggests a deep, rich shade like thick red vintage. But remember Gladstone? The focus here isn't on the hue, redness, but on the value, darkness. To the Greek eye, the deep sea looked as dark as wine, very dark, almost black, absorbing the light. Number 2. Sheen and texture. But there is a more compelling theory. It's about the surface. Picture a symposium in ancient Greece. Imagine a large ceramic bowl, a kylix, in a room lit only by oil lamps. It's filled with dark, opaque wine. The liquid isn't just red, it's glossy, reflecting the flickering firelight. In this sense, the wine-faced sea describes a texture, a dark, heavy liquid with a restless, glittering surface. Number 3. Mood and menace. Here is the crucial clue. Homer almost exclusively uses this epithet for stormy, open seas. It's never a calm blue bay. This links the word to danger, violence, and death. Remember the face in Wine-Faced? Think of a human face darkened by rage. Homer wasn't describing a static watercolor painting. He was describing an angry, living entity. Number 4. The oxen connection. And this solves the riddle of the wine dark oxen. Why use the same word for a beast? It's not just about a reddish-brown coat, it's about vitality. The Greeks saw a shared essence between the surging sea and the straining ox. It wasn't just that they were both dark, they were both possessed of a terrifying muscular power. The word captures that mix of visual saturation, dark gloss, and symbolic energy, turbulence and strength. See how it all fits together. This one strange epithet is a microcosm of the entire Greek worldview. It's not a flat label. It is a holistic, multisensory experience. It conveys texture, light, danger, and life all at once. Once you grasp that, Homer's colors stop looking like mistakes and start looking like poetry of a completely different level. So why was Homer's language built this way? It wasn't biological, it was cultural. It was a fundamentally different system of categorizing reality. Scholars point to 4 main reasons. Number 1. Luminosity over hue. As we've seen with Gladstone, the Greek eye was tuned to light versus dark. Value was simply more pragmatic than tint. Number 2. Loaded words. Homeric words weren't just stickers for colors, they were containers of experience. Unops wasn't just dark red, it carried the weight of danger and rage. The iron sky wasn't just grey, it was heavy and hard. The visual was inseparable from the tactile and emotional. Number 3. Semantic shift. Language evolves. Take Quaneos. Today, cyan means a specific bright blue, but for Homer, it likely just meant darkness. The meaning drifted over thousands of years. A classic example of semantic shift. Number 4. Material culture. This is crucial. In a world where dyeing technology was primitive and stable blue dyes were incredibly rare, there was no practical need to create a separate category for blue. If you can't make it, you don't tend to name it. This leads us to the main point. Homer's language feels fluid because we are looking at a language at an earlier developmental stage. This mix of color, texture, and emotion isn't a bug, it's a feature. And it turns out this wasn't just a Greek work, it was a predictable step in a universal human journey. This brings us to the groundbreaking theory that explains the why. Brent Berlin and Paul Kay, in their landmark 1969 study, Basic Color Terms, they challenged the dominant idea that languages slice up the color spectrum randomly. Instead, they argued that color terms evolve in a strict, universal sequence in every culture on Earth. The core of the theory is the basic color term, or BCT. Not every color word counts. To be a BCT, a word has to pass a strict test, monolexemic. It must be a single word, like red, not a phrase, like light blue. Unrestricted. It must apply to anything. Blonde doesn't count, because you only use it for hair, beer, or wood. Psychologically salient. It must be known by everyone, unlike niche words like chartreuse or taupe. Number 4. It must be abstract, not just the name of an object like gold or olive. Berlin and Kay's discovery was that these terms don't just pop up randomly. They evolve in a strict universal hierarchy. It's a system with 7 stages. If a language has a color from stage 5, it is guaranteed to have all the colors from stage 1 through 4. Stage 1. All languages start here. They don't distinguish hues. Only dark or cool versus light or warm. Stage 2. The first true color to emerge is always red. It is the most visceral and visible color in any culture. Stages 3 and 4. Next come green and yellow. The order can vary. Stage 5. Only here, quite late in the game, does blue finally appear. Stage 6. Then comes brown. Stage 7. Finally, we get the rest colors: purple, pink, orange, and gray. To prove their theory, researchers launched the massive World Color Survey. They asked speakers of 110 different languages to name 320 standardized color tiles, known as Munsell chips. The results confirmed the hypothesis and introduced a crucial concept: macro-categories. In early language stages, a single word covers a massive chunk of the color spectrum. Linguists use the term GRU, a mashup of green and blue, to describe a category that lumps both colors together. A classic example is the Welsh word glass, which historically covered blue, green, and even gray. Languages evolve by partitioning, splitting these giant macro-categories into smaller, more specific ones. Armed with this map, we can pinpoint exactly where Homer stands. Gladstone's data, the dominance of black, white, and red, places Homeric Greek firmly around stage 2. It is a textbook example of a language that has not yet reached stage 5. The birth of blue. Homer's system wasn't broken, it was just early. This concept of microcategories explains why words like guaneos and glafkos seem so slippery to us. They weren't bad attempts to say blue. They were functional terms for huge categories like dark or cool, and light or shimmering. The spectrum just hadn't been split yet. A quick nuance: Berlin and Kay focused on hue, but as we know, Greeks focused on brightness, value. This isn't a contradiction, it's a confirmation. Remember stage 1? The universal starting point of all human language is the distinction between light and dark. Homer was simply closer to that fundamental root. So why does it follow this specific order? It's not random. It's a complex interplay of biology, culture, and technology. Number 1. Cultural salience. A new term is born only when it becomes useful. Red is visceral. It signals blood, danger, or passion. That's why it's always the first to be named. It demands attention. Number 2. Technology. The ability to name a color often follows the ability to make it. In antiquity, reliable blue pigments were notoriously difficult to produce. If you can't manufacture it, you rarely name it. Number 3. Object-based naming. Abstract color words often start as names for things. The classic example in English is orange color. The fruit came first. The color was named after it. Before the fruit arrived in Europe, that hue was just called yellow-red. This explains the blue gap. Even if Greeks could physically see blue, they had no linguistic incentive to isolate it. It wasn't culturally urgent, and it wasn't technologically available. Greek didn't fully take that step until the classical period around the 5th century BC. To be fair, the Berlin and Kay theory isn't settled law. It's not dogma. Over the years, it has been critiqued and refined, even by Berlin and Kay themselves. The modern consensus is more nuanced. Color language is a dynamic dance between universal biological constraints and local cultural needs. This brings us to the most practical question. Do we still think like Greeks? Or has our modern obsession with hue completely killed that ancient multisensory way of seeing the world? The answer is no. We actually use Greek-style color terms all the time, especially when we talk about feelings, aesthetics, or art. Let's try a thought experiment. I'm going to give you two color words. They are almost identical in terms of spectral wavelength. I won't even show them to you, just listen to the words. Crimson and scarlet. I bet you felt a massive difference. But it wasn't about the pigment. It was about the semantic weight. Which one felt heavier? Which one felt denser, slower, perhaps regal or tragic? Probably crimson, the color of thick velvet or deep blood. And which one felt faster, sharper, more alarming? Scarlet, the color of fire and fresh blood. Same hue, completely different emotional and tactile containers. We do this with textures too. Think of car paint. We say metallic or chrome. Neither of these are really colors. They are descriptions of how light behaves on a surface, just like the Greek glyphkos. Or take the word ashen. Technically, it's just a pale gray. But the word carries a texture. It feels dry, matte, powdery. It carries a mood of death, shock, or exhaustion. It's a feeling, not just a hex code. Think about words like pearlescent. It doesn't just mean white, it describes a shifting iridescent shine. Or neon, which describes a color that seems to glow from within. And terms like matte or glossy are pure texture descriptors that completely change a color's character. We still name colors after objects, just like Homer did. Burgundy, earthy, smoky, mustard, rust. Essentially, our language has split in two. For science and tech, we have RGB and Pantone codes. But for art, emotion, and storytelling, we kept the Greek method. And sometimes this Greek system produces names that describe an entire scene or event rather than a hue. In English, we have descriptive phrases like shocking pink or electric blue. Words that describe the aggressive impact of the color, not its wavelength. History gives us even weirder examples. In the 18th century, a popular color was cuisse de nymphe émue, literally the sigh of an aroused or frightened nymph, or the historic color Isabella, a yellowish gray supposedly named after the soiled linens of a queen who vowed not to change her underwear until a siege was won. Just like wine dark sea, these aren't hex codes, they are stories. They describe a complex, holistic experience, texture, emotion, and the context combined. Now let's go back to the puzzle we started with. The colors were completely wrong, but you recognized the face instantly. Now you know why. The artist Stan Miller demonstrates this perfectly on his channel. He has performed this experiment multiple times, painting faces with greens, purples, or blues. As you can see, the specific pigment barely matters. It works because your brain is wired to prioritize structure. It reads volume, form, and space entirely through light and shadow. Every realist artist knows this golden rule. Memorize this simple formula. Value creates the form. Hue just decorates it. If you want realism, getting the value right is always more important than getting the hue right. As someone who loves to draw, I see this principle proved again and again. Stan Miller builds his entire curriculum on it. His philosophy is simple. You have to learn to depict reality truthfully before you can start distorting it. To teach the most important skill, value control, he assigns a specific exercise. He actually has his students trace the image. He removes the burden of drawing or construction entirely, so they can focus 100% of their brain power on painting. Using only black paint, they learn to replicate the exact tonal relationships, identifying the darkest darks, the midtones, and the lightest lights. As Miller says, we don't touch color until we master this. This practice trains the eye to see past the hue and straight into the underlying structure of light and shadow. This principle is universal. Look at this painting of a door. It looks completely realistic. Your brain might not even realize instantly that it's monochrome. That is the power of flawless value work. But the most stunning proof is in this cityscape. Here, the artist uses a limited palette of just two pigments, a warm brown and a cool blue. By mixing just these two, he creates every color he needs, a full spectrum of warm and cool grays across every value level. This reveals a fascinating trick of human perception. Looking at the finished piece, you'd never guess it was painted with only two colors. Why? Because the variation in value, light to dark and temperature, warm to cool, creates a complete illusion. Your brain fills in the gaps, perceiving a rich, multicolored world. This proves it better than words. To create a convincing, alive image, you don't need a million colors. What matters are the relationships, the structure of forms, and above all the values.